I love Australian wine. It really revolutionised everything for me. I spent 20 years in Europe, France mostly, thought I knew everything there was to know, and then I went to Australia in '83, and the learning process started all over again. If France is my second home, Australia is my third home, definitely. Australian wine's got to the top in about 20 years. How long did it take other countries to get to the top? France, it took hundreds of years. Australia, from about 1980, I would say, to about 2005, it went from nowhere to it's the best-selling, it sells more wine than anybody else in the UK. Well, you ask the Aussies, they always say, oh, we just work harder than the rest. Sheer bloody hard work, mate. And that's true. I mean, they are tough, hard workers. They have to be in their climate. I mean, it's very tough to make wine in Australia. It's also about the hardest wine market in the world. It's very competitive. That's forced them to excel. You know? Most of the early wine people in Australia were German, so they kept that sort of tradition of very hard work, very clean winemaking, and that's not done them any harm. They also mastered the art of, or the skills of refrigeration. Before there was refrigeration in winemaking, Australian wines just tended to taste like stewed prawns. You really need to be able to chill things down in hot climates. And refrigeration has basically changed the whole wine map. I mean, when the first wine atlases were written, there wasn't much refrigeration, and you know, hot places like Australia didn't stand a chance. Now, yes, they do. In Bordeaux places, they're very secretive still. I mean, you know, they don't tell you really what they do. They just put it down to their fantastic terroir and God. Whereas Australians, you get, you know, after a few beers, they tell you almost anything. So that sort of openness and exchange, competitiveness, that's what built up their standards. I mean, they have these competitions in Australia. They're very serious competitions, all the different regions. And basically, if you want your wine to sell, you've got to win lots of gold medals. And, well, that doesn't always apply in other countries where, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you win. It certainly does in Australia. One of the reasons Australian wine was so successful was it was easy to understand. People baffled by other countries, appellations, took to Australia because it was basically straightforward and simple. But that's changing now because Australians are beginning to realise that people do actually like a lot of the mystery and mystique and more interesting things. So Australia is now keen to bring out its regionality. I mean, you look at the map of Australia, it's very big, it's got lots of regions. If you put Australia over a map of Europe, it covers most of southern Europe. So it's like, saying that most of Australian is sold as southeastern Australian wine. Well, that's an area about the size of France, Spain and Italy put together. So it would be a nonsense to have southwest European wine. It's a nonsense to have southeast Australian wine. So now you know, people, it really pays to begin to understand the difference between Hunter Valley, Barossa Valley, Yarra Valley, and McLaren Vale and Western Australia places. You know, there's a raft of different climates and soils and traditions and grape varieties. It's really getting quite complex. It's a good idea to know a little bit more about Australia because you get much more interesting wines.